In Activity 12, Curious Sea Creatures, students examine the skeletal remains of a variety of sea animals that live in the intertidal and neritic zones. Students first discuss the conditions in the neritic zone and then examine the skeletons of some sea creatures commonly found in the intertidal zone and the shallow ocean area covering the continental shelf. You will need the following materials from the kit: Activity Sheet 12, barnacles, magnifiers, sand dollars, sea urchins, starfishes, pieces of coral, crossing the ocean puzzle and clues, fact sheets for starfish, sand dollar, sea urchin, barnacle, coral, sponge, and seahorse, ocean fun facts sheet, seahorses, and pieces of organic sponge. You will also need to provide sheets of white paper, pencils, box of crayons, and a cellulose sponge. To prepare for the activity, make a copy of Activity Sheet 12 and the fact sheets for each student. You may want to have an artificial sponge on hand for students to compare with an organic sponge. Each team of 4 will need a starfish, a sand dollar, a sea urchin, 1 or more barnacles, and an optional piece of synthetic sponge. Each team will also need 2 magnifiers, a box of crayons, and a sheet of white paper on which to place their specimens. Note that teams of 4 will take turns examining the 4 seahorses, natural sponges, and pieces of coral. To begin the activity, tell students that the sea is home to many life forms, not just mollusks. Then divide the class into teams of 4 and distribute a sheet of white paper and 2 magnifiers to each team. Hand out the sea creature specimens and inform students that all of these objects are the dried remains or the skeletons of animals that live in shallow ocean areas. Explain that some of these specimens lived in the same habitat as the mollusks, the intertidal zone, that is alternately flooded and exposed. Ask students, which of these animals do you think might live in the same zone as clams, scallops, mussels, and oysters? Why do you think so? Help students understand that the sand dollar, starfish, barnacle, and sea urchin all live in the intertidal zone. Some students may have observed these animals at the shore. Others may have guessed based on the relatively flat appearance of these tidal-dwelling animals. Make sure the class realizes that many other animals live beyond the tidal area. Next, remind students of their contour maps of the ocean floor and point out that around each continent, the continental shelf extends outward under the ocean for many miles, then drops off steeply at the continental slope. Explain that the ocean area that extends from the low tide line to the edge of the continental shelf is called the neritic zone, and that the neritic zone is home to the greatest variety and greatest numbers of ocean life. Ask students, how do you think this environment is different from the intertidal environment? Help the class understand that the animals who live in the neritic zone, the shallow ocean area over the continental shelf, are always submerged. In fact, they would not survive if they were exposed to air or direct sunlight in the intertidal zone. Ask, which of the organisms on display do you think live in the neritic zone? Students should respond that the sponge, the seahorse, and the coral live in the neritic zone. Further explain that more animals live in the neritic zone than in any other ocean area because the water in the neritic zone is relatively warm as sunlight penetrates far into the water, and because the food supply is abundant. Remind students that the animals they classified in the previous activity are called mollusks. Ask students, what part of our skeletons help us stand up straight? Students should say that our spine or backbone helps us stand up straight. Explain that the backbone is not just one bone. If it were, we would not be able to bend our bodies. Instead, the backbone is several small circular bones stacked one on top of the other. These small bones are called vertebrae, and every organism that has a backbone is called a vertebrate. Ask students, what other vertebrates can you name? Students may suggest vertebrates such as mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. Inform the class that one way in which scientists classify animals is according to whether or not the animals have backbones or spinal columns. For instance, a vertebrate is any animal like a human, an eagle, a snake, a frog, or a salmon with a spinal column. Conversely, soft-bodied mollusks are called invertebrates because they have no backbones. Next, distribute Activity Sheet 12 and have students examine the starfish with a magnifier. Tell them to answer the questions about the starfish based on their observations and on any prior knowledge they may have. Then distribute the starfish fact sheet. Encourage students to read the fact sheet, discuss it within their team, and revise their activity sheet answers based on what they now know about the animal. Repeat this process with the remaining 6 animals. Then, to review, ask students which of the 7 organisms you have studied today is a vertebrate. Why do you think so? Students should identify all fish as vertebrates. Point out that the seahorse swims upright, which is a clue that it has a backbone. Finally, distribute an Ocean Fun Facts sheet to each student to take home or to discuss in class. Invite students to choose one fun fact to illustrate with a cartoon and caption. To conclude the activity, collect the specimens and magnifiers and return them to the kit. You may want to give students a folder or envelope in which to keep their activity sheets and fact sheets. For science background, reinforcement activities, curriculum connections, and information about the Delta Science Reader, please consult your DSM Teacher's Guide.